Good afternoon. My name is Carlton Mackey, and I am the director of the Ethics in the Arts program at the Emory University Center for Ethics and the co-director of the Emory University Arts and Social Justice Fellows program. It's my pleasure to welcome each of you to this project showcase and celebration of the amazing work of this inaugural cohort of Arts and Social Justice Fellows. This program would not be possible without the support of literally all of my colleagues at the Center for Ethics, the Emory College Center for Creativity and the Arts, the Department of Film and Media Studies, and without the generous support of Southwest Airlines. To the artists, to the faculty, to the students who took part in this transformative yet very challenging undertaking, and to the parents who probably felt like you were enrolled in college this year, we thank you for hanging in there with us. I cannot wait for you to see what we created together.
Thank you, Carlton, and thank you everyone for coming today to celebrate with us and learn from the projects undertaken by Emory students in collaboration with our inaugural cohort of Emory Arts and Social Justice Fellows and members of our faculty. I'm Kevin Carnes, Associate Dean for the Arts at Emory College and co-director of the Arts and Social Justice Fellows program. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank Emory College of Arts and Sciences for their financial backing and the staff of Emory's Center for Creativity and Arts for administrative support, especially Emma Yarbrough, Head of Communications, Nicholas Serby, Graphic Designer, and Jackie Pritz, the project's administrator who's done a heroic job keeping things running smoothly throughout. I also wish to thank and introduce Dr. Candy Tate, Associate Director of the Center, whose multiple engagements over many years with issues of the arts and justice in Atlanta and beyond make her an ideal master of ceremonies for our event today. Thank you, Candy, for leading us through today's discussion.
In the middle of a global pandemic and a national reckoning on race, this Arts and Social Justice Fellows program brings together 6 artists and 6 faculty members, 6 courses, and dares to courageously explore the issues that are most pressing to our society at this very pivotal moment in our history.
In the late summer of 2020, we put out a call for artists to become involved with the program and for faculty to become involved with the program. We had funding through pooling our resources for 6 faculty and for 6 artists. We started with a faculty call and we received 40 applications from Emory faculty from every division and unit of the university. We received 75 applications from some of the leading Atlanta artists in visual arts, musicians, actors, people from all different artistic spaces and spheres of engagement. That was a momentous task to choose our 6 artist fellows, but we were able to in the end. We paired them with our 6 faculty members, embedded them in their classes.
Through exhibits and installations that are created, whether it be film, whether it be photography, whether it be paintings, visual art exhibits, we hope to provide an opportunity for this narrative to continue beyond this singular moment. Through exhibits and installations, both at the university and in the community, we hope to provide a space for the dialogue to continue and to create meaningful interaction and intersecting points so that the learning will not be contained simply as a product of a class, but as an ongoing, evolving conversation and dialogue that lives within the community, that is accessible by the community, and is an organic part of the community moving forward.
With the goal of bringing the discussions that arise within the Fellows program to the broad campus community of students, of faculty, and of staff.
And this fellowship program is giving birth to a new generation of activists, a new generation in multiple forms of resistance that can allow students, scholars, and community to connect and for us to work collectively in the different ways that we are, in our different ways of being, so that we can, as a community, collectively move toward a world that is a better place for all of us to live and to thrive.
We're honored to have today's conversation kicked off by Gregory Fenves, 21st president of Emory University. President Fenves joined the Emory community in the midst of overlapping, unfolding crises in the summer of 2020, just as we were grappling with our response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and as we were watching with horror the violent events that led us to feel that we must act, in part through the creation of this program. President Fenves.
Thank you, Kevin. And I'm sorry I can't be with you live, but I'm on my way to Austin, Texas for the birth of my second grandchild. But I very much appreciate the opportunity to welcome everyone to this virtual forum and to express my support for Emory's Arts and Social Justice Fellowship. This innovative new program speaks to the very heart of what Emory does best, harnessing the power of creativity, community building, and interdisciplinary collaboration to explore and enlighten. The fellowship was created this summer in the direct response to the unfolding crisis sparked by the tragic killings of Black men and women, including George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and here in Georgia, Ahmaud Arbery and Rayshard Brooks, which inspired individuals here and the world over to demand racial justice and equity with renewed passion and purpose. These calls for action started a much-needed collective dialogue, a dialogue that we continue today with Emory's Arts and Social Justice Fellowship. The fact that the fellowship drew applications from 40 faculty members and more than 70 community artists, along with the participation of over 100 of our students, is evidence that this initiative has tapped in to a historic moment in a profound way. In times of crisis, in times of unrest, the role of art becomes even more important in our lives as a source for expression, for comfort, for strength, and for shared understanding. And that's something I know personally to be true. Artistic expression can help document who we are and what moment we're in as individuals and as a community. And it can also amplify voices that are sometimes marginalized and lost. In this way, art can help us build stronger communities. I want to thank everyone here today for demonstrating the courage to confront difficult questions through your art and your creativity. And finally, I want to thank Kevin and Carlton for envisioning this partnership between Emory College Center for Creativity and the Arts and the Emory University Center for Ethics. It is through their hard work and their dedication that this program was realized so swiftly. And to all the artists involved, along with our students and faculty members, thank you for leading us in this journey. Thank you for your contributions. I can't wait to see and experience all that you've created.
Thank you so much, President Fenves. Good afternoon, all who are here today. My name is Dr. Candy Tate, and I want to acknowledge that Emory University and Atlanta are on the land of the Muskogee Creek and Cherokee Indigenous people. In our afternoon webinar format, we will share 2 videos, presentations at a time, and have a brief discussion to follow. Please take this time to put your questions for artists and faculty in the Q&A of the Zoom format at the bottom of your screen, and we will address them during the discussion time. You may also utilize the chat feature for general comments. Our first Art and Social Justice cohort is artist Ash Nash with faculty member Carlton Mackey and Professor Edward Queen. The course was titled Film, Media, and the Art of Social Change. The video documentary is titled The Coming Up Project, a story of hot sauce and hope.
What should I be licking? Like, just, and then.
Don't worry, because he was just sitting here. I just came here. Sitting here.
Mind my business. The fight breaker, I stopped. Yes. Don't say you can put it up on me. I did nothing. We sitting here the whole time. Mind our business. What are you doing?
What do you think the scariest part about being a Black man is?
Scariest part of being a black man.
Not having equal rights. Yeah, about it.
Dr. Narvi Post, she the founder. She was a long-time teacher in Atlanta public school system. One thing she noticed in the school system was that they weren't teaching the true history, you know what I'm saying, for our people. And so she traveled the world, collected different artifacts, and she basically created a teaching museum so that people of our descent could come and learn about their true history. It's an events center, community center, martial arts, yoga, African-centered education, garden programming. Brother Kevin ran into Abby maybe a few months ago and was like, he needs some support. And so, they never had their own kind of garden to manage. They pretty much going on and help support other farms around the city, but it was a perfect opportunity for them to now steward their own space, build that community relationship, and then they be able to produce their own food. So we need these institutions in our community. We just got a new roof on it, but the roof had been damaged for some years, so it's a lot of water damage and internal damage as a result of that. So it's so pivotal for this community. This community changes so rapidly. This street don't look the same way it did 2-3 years ago. You know what I mean? I love how they just take ownership of it. You know what I mean? They see it as their own. You know what I mean? Like they get a sense of pride out of seeing food grow, eating from their own hands, you know what I mean? And that's exactly what this program is about. That's exactly what this work is about.
I am Abiodun Henderson, the founder of the Come Up Project featuring the Gangsters to Growers program.
This is college. I'm actually gonna take some home today for my grandma to cook. This and care.
We're talking about food security and building the food system, but nobody was able to afford any labor at these farms. We should have a program where young people are paid $15 an hour to learn how to grow food and provide labor on these Black-owned farms, and we'll have workshops just like we had during the camp, ways that we can heal, group therapy, political education. We are building economic empowerment for our community. We are bringing industry back to our community. We are building food systems that are Black run in our community. Highly intelligent, strong youth that are down to change their community. Our future is like having a Black supply chain from the soil to the finished product. We don't make many things as Black folks. We don't control hardly any industries. How do we heal and bring our community back together? Because our community is fractured right now. One of the things about the program that's the best part, right? We were able to bring together these dope young people, and folks from all over our village come with all different types of backgrounds, but they all Black and are able to come and pour into the youth in all different types of ways. Like I've said a million times, the last program I was using my food stamps. Folks say don't talk about the money, is it more people that you need, more educators, more this, more that? No, we have a plethora of folks that are down to educate the youth. We have spaces in the community that we're able to utilize. It's really about the money. We're a social enterprise. We would love people to invest in us. Young folks are dying out here. They are dying off of money, off of depression, and the way the system treats us. We got folks dying mentally in the prison system. We go to court. When you step in that courtroom, it's nothing but young Black folks that are waiting to see that judge. Our youth are dying out here mentally and physically.
How do you, as a white woman in America in 2020, what have you realized? What have been some epiphanies you had? What have you learned, or what do you feel that you could change or can do moving forward?
Being a white woman, I've always seen myself in the media in a favorable light. I've always felt represented positively. And I mean, obviously, like, there are some discrepancies about with being a woman, but for the most part, I've never felt frustrated or all that. Like, I've never had these like pent up feelings of like kind of like a discontinuity between what's being represented and how I feel and how I see my peers. And even listening to people's interviews, like, it's so clear that, I mean, we hear about it, we know about it, but like hearing it come directly from like Black men who are experiencing this, there's so clear that there's just this misrepresentation and this demonization of Black bodies in the media. And I feel like so much we get caught up in like statistics and just, you know, we have like the media selectively chooses stories and narratives to weave, and you lose voices and you lose experiences. And I think that's part of the reason why classes like this and movements like this are so important, because it gives voices back that have been robbed by mainstream media.
My name is Roece.
Is Aditi Kumar.
Jane Parvin.
Edwin Wang.
Is Alicia Vargelis.
I am 19 years old and I'm from Atlanta.
I'm 20 years old and I'm from Australia and India.
I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I'm 20 years old.
I'm from Beijing, China, and I'm 20 years old.
I'm 21 years old and I'm from San Francisco, California.
Represents hope, redemption, and community.
Is change, perseverance, and empowerment.
Is important, impactful, and incredibly change-making.
Hope, inspiration, and hard work. And I took this course because it's not often that you get to combine what you're doing in the classroom with work that you're passionate about in the community. And as someone who's really passionate about empowering my community here in Atlanta, getting to work with this organization and do it in this setting where I also earned credit and learned a lot through the course was such a rewarding experience.
I took this course because I've always wanted to take a film course at Emory, and so when I came across this one, I thought it was perfect for someone like me. I planned to go into the field of global health, and when I read that the title of this class was called Film, Media, and the Art of Social Change, I thought it was a perfect bridge between one of my hobbies and global health. And I've been so grateful for the opportunities that we've been able to have in this class, and I'm glad that we get to tell the story of some of these men in Gangsters to Growers, because it's a story worth telling, and these men have overcome so many obstacles in their life.
Because I find it fascinating to use art as a medium to voice for the underprivileged people and to expose the injustice and bias in the system.
Saw this class listed under the courses. I knew right away that I wanted to take it because I thought it was extremely exciting to be able to work with my peers to make a documentary, and also, even more importantly, work with a local artist. There's no way we could have done it without Ash and Griff, and I do think that even with COVID and so many other technical difficulties having classes online, it was still a truly incredible experience to be able to see the work that Ash does and also work together to make a documentary about Gangsters to Growers. And it is a completely different experience than other classwork when you know that the work you're putting in is actually has the possibility to make a difference.
Wonderful, wonderful. Be sure to put your questions in the Q&A. We're going to start the next video, which is our cohort of artists, Garrett Turner and Professor Hank Klibanoff. The course is called Georgia Civil Rights Cold Cases.
Atlanta, Georgia, the city too busy to hate, the most liberal city in the South. In the fall of 1906, Atlanta was on the brink of explosion, an explosion of white supremacy. On September 22nd, 1906, local newspapers ran sensationalized reports of black men assaulting white women. By nightfall, the streets were overrun by thousands of white men ready to attack any black person in sight, seeking to restore racial order through violence and terror. Over 4 days, scores of black men, women, and children were brutalized and killed. None of the killers were ever convicted, and the black community never received so much as an apology from city officials. What's been known as the Atlanta Race Riot of 1906, but what we call the Atlanta Race Massacre, is a mostly forgotten episode. This semester at Emory University, 16 students seek to remember.
Hi, I'm Hank Klibanoff.
And I'm Garrett Turner.
This semester, Garrett and I have been teaching the students in my Georgia Civil Rights Cold Cases class at Emory University.
We've been working together to create an artistic project in response to their research of the 1906 Race Massacre. Each of our 16 students has written a depiction of one moment from the massacre as a scene, short story, or poem. All 16 of those moments were then filmed as dramatic readings by a group of 12 professional actors.
Now, our hope is that these personal and intimate moments will humanize the victims and present a much more complete view of the scope and the impact of those 4 fateful days in Atlanta.
We also hope that these scenes educate our community by helping us remember and commemorate this harrowing, overlooked episode in our history.
Saturday, September 22nd, Atlanta, Georgia, 1906. Barbershop, 27 North Forsyth Street. The sign on the outside of the door reads closed. It's dark outside. William and Eugene are closing the barbershop. William sweeps the hair on the ground into the dustpan. Eugene counts the money from the register.
Yeah, how much did we make today?
$6.
We made 8 last Saturday.
Well, that's just how business works.
It's because of Alonzo Herndon.
William motions across the street to a much fancier black-owned barbershop.
Can you believe it? A black man who only cuts white people's hair.
Well, you got to admit it's pretty smart.
You have a point.
Hey, he may have more money, but we have the morals.
A knock on the door.
We're closed.
Please, I really need a haircut.
Joseph, is that you?
Yes, me.
Eugene unlocks the door.
Well, come on in.
Thank you, Eugene.
Now, what are you doing here so late at night?
I don't mean to intrude, but I have an interview tomorrow.
Well, that's big news. What kind of job are you applying for?
Not for a job, but college.
Well, you can't go to college with your hair looking like that.
That's what I was thinking too.
Come on, take a seat. This is a special occasion. I'll make an exception.
I really appreciate your help.
Joseph takes a seat in the barber chair.
Hey, Will.
Good to see you, Joe.
All right. So how's your family doing? I haven't seen your brother here for a while.
He got arrested.
For what?
He was just out looking for work like everyone else, but they picked him up for vagrancy.
Doggone cops.
That's a shame.
That's why I'm thinking college might be a better choice. To sit inside, focus on studying.
Well, what you planning to study?
Chemistry.
So you're going to be a scientist?
That's the plan.
Well, I'll be Dr. Joe. That's what we'll be calling you.
Yeah. There. All done. Take a look.
Eugene hands Joseph a mirror.
Whew, looks great.
Yeah, you'll be ready to impress the college tomorrow.
Any last minute tips?
Eye contact. Don't speak too fast. And make sure you're there early.
I'm a bit nervous.
You'll be just fine.
Did you hear that?
I did.
What's going on?
It looks like something going on outside. Maybe a robbery.
It sounded like broken glass.
It sounds like a big group of people.
That can't be good.
Joseph, why don't you head on out?
Hey, they're headed our way.
Yeah, better to go out back, exit through the theater.
You sure?
Yeah, we got everything under control.
Okay.
And Joseph.
Yes, sir?
You'll be great tomorrow.
Thanks, Eugene.
But we gotta keep trying and keep fighting, play by the rules, and keep hoping for some kind of justice. They can ignore us in the streetcars, ban us from their shops, but they can't keep us totally silent.
Do you really think we can get by just by playing the rules of their game? They indicted 60 men, Priscilla. 60! That ain't playing by the rules. Those white men haven't been playing by any rules since before all the mess in September. I don't know why we keep going through all this just to get disappointed with the results.
I hear you, but we just gotta keep pushing, keep fighting for something.
Keep fighting for what?
What other option do we have, Laura? I have this one opportunity. Shouldn't I take it to finally speak up, to tell the truth of what happened that night? I can tell the jury that Officer Jordan, those two white men came in and shot my brother George when he was already wounded. I, for one, am grateful for the chance to try and help my brother and my husband.
You really think they're gonna listen to you? I'm sorry, Priscilla. I didn't mean to come off so strong. I think these months have just been really getting to me. It's like this never-ending cycle. I'm sorry. I let the anger get the best of me. It's so easy to do that nowadays.
You know I'm tired of all this too. Tired of reading the same stories in the news, hearing the same comments from everyone. I haven't had a good night's sleep since that night in September. Everyone gathered on our lawn, shouting, the officers yelling at us, storming through the bedroom, the gunshots. That night will haunt me for the rest of my life. My life was destroyed that weekend, and I will never get it back. I'll never get my Frank back. He was taken from me when he was standing in that same door you came in through. He was standing in his front door, trying to look over the neighborhood and protect me. Then he was shot. Some white men took my husband from me, and they'll never bring him justice. You know how hard it is to pass through that door? To go into the bedroom where George was? I was trying to take care of him in the bedroom and bring him some kind of peace and comfort. Then that officer burst into my house and shot him twice. How am I supposed to live here when my brother was shot here, when my husband was... I'll never get my husband back, Laura. $60 men. You said it yourself. We both know they're playing a game set up for us to lose. But I've spent the past 3 months haunted by that night, and now my family is on trial. And I can't just sit back and let those officers win. I can at least try. Try for George. Try for Frank. You know, Frank was a witness once in a murder trial just like me. And he did such a good job testifying. I was so proud of him, too. Now it's my turn. This is my chance to get the truth out there.
Wow, powerful. Our second video, I was on mute, was from the Georgia Civil Rights Cold Case course with Garrett Turner and Professor Hank Klibanoff. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A portion of the Zoom. I know we have one immediately from Lisa Paulson about our first video from the Gangsters to Growers group. And they were curious to hear how the students in the class participated in the creation of the piece.
Yes, thank you for that question. It was honestly, it was quite the challenge. We basically, there were multiple things happening within this course. For one, it being the first ever course that Emory presented to the university. So there was no blueprint. And we pretty much pulled this together across up to 20 students across 5 continents. So that's why you see the story of Gangsters to Growers, but also the youth of the students in which they were a part of this first ever course and their experiences and how it affected them. So that's what you see there.
Great.
And I would also like to add, one of the other profound things about this project was that these students met the young men of Gangsters to Growers who are on completely opposite end of the spectrum. And you think about how that would have affected us even years ago during the civil rights, this type of exchanges.
Right. Carlton, Dr. McQueen, how was this for teaching for you all?
This whole project posed an amazing challenge, while at the same time it gave us an opportunity to connect in some real meaningful ways. One of the most powerful parts of this course for me, in addition to working with Ash and Griff and Gangsters to Growers, and just somehow building a movie, making a movie with people all over the world, was our ability to have meaningful connection with each other in the first half of the class. Before we even did anything involving the film, we looked at the history of art-based social change, and we gave space, as Dr. Queen talked about in another video that we produced, about the power of seeing the students as human, and inviting them to see us and the people with whom we would be connecting as humans, and to really not just let the course be about the lessons and the facts and about race, but about really what we were all collectively experiencing during this time. And we shared openly, and it was a transformative experience for us all.
As Ms. Nash said, I mean, and as Mr. Mackey said, the challenge of creating a movie virtually with people all over was there, but the students participated in the storyline, some of the filming, editing, and really the part that came out in the video was this issue of their representation. And the first part of the class was spent a great deal really getting students to think about how do you interrogate any form of media and how it represents a story, how it represents other people. And they took that lesson deeply to heart as they struggled to put this video together.
Fabulous. I'd love to bring in Hank and Garrett. Tell us about your student engagement and how you engage with the archives.
Garrett, you want to go first?
Garrett, if you're
Sure.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to jump in first. Working with the students was
not just a pleasure, but also an inspiration. I think what stood out to me is that theater is such a collaborative art form. Um, and so to be working with all 16 of the students, to be giving notes, but also to be learning from them in terms of the research they were doing about each of their particular scenes and what they were trying to convey, and then the sort of back and forth in that process, and just feeling them being so generous and opening up. And it was yeah, it was beautiful. Also, I think as an artist, just in the midst of the decimation of the creative industry of theater during the virus, to not only have the work, but like to reach out to some of my friends to bring into this project, and then the project being so meaningful itself, so resonant with current experience through the uprising this summer, and all the lessons that we could learn from how these Black lives became in jeopardy back in 1906. And what they went through. The amalgamation of it all was just really a beautiful process to be a part of.
Dr. Tate, if I might add to that, keep in mind that when the students signed up to take the Georgia Civil Rights Cold Cases Project this last fall, this current semester we're just ending, they did so thinking probably that we would do what we've done in the past, which is to examine a racially motivated killing in Georgia that took place in the modern civil rights era, so between 1945, 1968, 1970. And that I would teach it the way I always had. Then next thing we know, I have gotten immersed in the 1906 Atlanta race riot, which we believe should be called the Atlanta Race Massacre. And so I switched to that and sent the note out to the students that I was making this change. And then the Arts and Social Justice Project came on. And so suddenly I've got to write the students another note that says, keep in mind that I want you to know that I've got this other plan in mind now. We're going to have a phenomenal actor and writer, Garrett Turner, come into class. And let's just all, take a chance and have a good time doing this, as agonizing as some of these stories might be. And I didn't lose a single student. They all stayed with the project from the very beginning and got totally immersed in this. And none of them had ever written, or many of them had never written a word of a theatrical script. And they did it, and with Garrett's help, they did it, at an extraordinarily terrific professional level, or near professional. And then for them to be able to see professional actors performing it, for me to be able to see that, I just was sitting on the sidelines, transformed in my own way, and mesmerized by the work that they were doing. I'm just so proud of them for staying with the class, for immersing themselves, and for figuring out a way to give the actors something emotional and powerful to work with.
That's great. One of our follow-up questions is on the first cold case play. It says that there were two people that were brutally murdered, and they wanted to know if those were the owners of the barbershop.
Right, yeah, that's who that was meant to portray. And just in terms of the research component, um, even like the address given at the beginning of that scene for what barbershop that was, there was a report that there was a barbershop across the street from Alonzo Herndon's barbershop where this incident went down. And our students, in terms of the archival material that another question dealt with, like found a map of Atlanta from 1906, located like where there was actually said to be a barbershop next to a theater across from the street from that, and gave that particular address, which I just mentioned to say of the deep research that went into these scenes. And then some of the characters that we gave were not particular actual people who lived that during that time, but like imagined characters in those circumstances. So it sort of ran the gambit in terms of how the scenes were come up with.
And I want to say before we finish here that none of this could have happened without the help of Sonam Vashi, an Emory alum who had taken the Georgia Civil Rights Cold Cases class when she was at Emory, and who came in as a teaching
assistant this semester. And she just led the research in an amazing way. And I'm so grateful to her. And basically, by the time the students started writing their script, they were pretty much authorities on what happened in the area that they had researched.
And so they also asked, did the school student go to college?
So the student was a part of the creative license
Creative
of
license,
how the
yeah.
scene was created. Yeah. So we're not sure that there was that actual person, but it was in this imagined moment of what could have happened to give life to the victims, in this final moment before what befell them.
Great.
If I may, I want to ask a question to the other folks in the video presentation before us. I'm interested in what's next for Gangsters to Growers, and I mean, it's just such an inspiring, um, the story and the work that y'all been doing with that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been, we've had a lot of behind the scenes. I can't really advise right now on what's next. All I can truly ask is that everyone that's a part of this call really reach out to them and support them. A good handful of them are in the chat. They are a nonprofit arm they're a social enterprise. And the Come Up Project is the umbrella to that. And Gangsters to Growers is the nonprofit arm in which these are 18 to 20-year-old formerly incarcerated young Black men. So when they come out, Miss Abby, who was also in this call, she founded Gangsters to Growers, and she really puts forth in this programming yoga, mental health, all the things that they have faced being profiled. I mean, this country was built on a system to keep us out. And it's important, even throughout this film, that, our students, Carlton suggested quite a bit of film resources, but I actually tasked the students to watch Ava DuVernay's 13th and also The Social Dilemma to show, especially in just this year, in their lifetime, the marketing of the killings of Black men and how it's all over. We want
Ash, we have you have the website in the chat, and they can follow up to see more.
Yeah, everyone can definitely go ahead and reach out to them in the chat and support them. And yeah.
Great. We have to move on to our next cohorts. So thank you all for these first and engaging questions. Our next video from the Art and Social Justice cohorts includes Dr. Fahamu Peku, the artist, and Professor Ari Eisen. The course is entitled Epigenetics and the Human Condition.
Good afternoon. I'm Fahamu Peku. I am a visual artist based here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm also an Emory alum. I graduated in 2018 from the Institute of Liberal Arts with a PhD.
My name is Ari Eisen, and I've been teaching at Emory over 30 years in biology and interdisciplinary studies and at the Center for Ethics. And Fahamu and I have been excited to be working together this semester on this art and social justice program, and it's turned into an interesting collaboration.
Working on this art and social justice fellowship was really exciting, largely because there's no real foundation for what we were doing, so it's very experimental from the outset, which has its pros and cons, but on the pros side, it allowed for us to really be imaginative in how we approach the goals of the fellowship.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought? I mean, this is not your run-of-the-mill biology class. This is epigenetics. This is a 300 level class. These are students who are going to be the next generation of physicians, and they're on their way to medical school, and we change each other a lot in this course, but it's important for folks to understand what epigenetics is. And it's just kind of a fancy word that means above genetics. So stuff that can happen to us, or a sensitivity or a kind of awareness, can be passed on in our DNA, not just the DNA. And that's what people kind of freak people out, as you can imagine. So a trauma, say a trauma I may have had when I was 14, could somehow, the kind of awareness, sensitivity that I had to that trauma, I can pass that with my DNA to my kid, making him or her more react to the environment in different ways than they would have if I hadn't experienced that. So that kind of transgenerational passing on of information is another kind of epigenetics that we didn't know existed, and you know, that's really what we began to explore. I think the most exciting stuff in the class was that idea that, that trauma could come out somehow.
You know, one of the things that I think was interesting is at the very beginning of this program, I imagine that a part of the reason I was paired with you, Dr. Eisen, was because of work that I was already doing around like African spiritual cosmologies and notions of ancestral veneration within those systems, and how some of those ideas parallel with what we are calling epigenetics and what we're looking at in the biology. And I think one of the really interesting things that happened as a result of our pairing was also realizing that it's more than just, as you mentioned, it's more than just a genetic transfer, but it's also very much informed by the environment that we live in, by the choices that we make, right? And so it's the coalescing of the genetics, the environment, and the choices that we make that inform us.
And that's a good point, because a lot of the stuff that happens to us, we choose, but a lot of it we don't, right? And that's kind of, if you combine all the things that happen to us that we choose and all the things that don't with our DNA, that's who we are. I mean, you know, so I think your work, this kind of idea of, and you could talk more eloquently about it than I can, but the idea that taking the African-American male experience, which we often think of as a negative, but the way you turn it into something, you know, beautiful or transformative, I think, and to think of that in molecular biological terms, you know, I think it really enriched both the students' experience of what they were learning and your art, I think, which, I don't know, maybe you want to talk about how we tried to take this very technical molecular stuff that I just talked about and then think in terms of art, you know,
Yeah.
how that.
Coming from the surrealist school of thought, we approached this project thinking of this concept called the Exquisite Corpse, which was often a collaborative practice between artists who subscribe to this surrealist school of thought, where they would work in tandem on a singular piece, but each person's voice sort of emerging through in that ultimate work. I had an experience, or rather an opportunity earlier this year to participate in a similar project where I worked with two different artists to create an exquisite corpse, each of us working on a part of a conceptual body independently of the others, right? So one person would do the head, one person would do the body, one person would do the legs. And so our approach to this particular project was very similar. We broke our students into groups and had them try to synthesize ideas from papers that they read, you know, at the cutting edge of epigenetic research, and try to synthesize those papers into an idea or a visual or a concept that could be translated into this sort of exquisite corpse project.
Cool things to kind of elaborate on what you're saying is these students had already been working in these groups for a long time, so they really kind of had this rich social dynamics already, right? So when Fahamu gave them this assignment of coming up with an image or an idea for parts of this exquisite corpse, for parts of this body, they already kind of knew each other. Also this, as you say, this exquisite corpse exercise by definition is collaborative. So that was cool because it's a science thing.
The major idea in the piece really sort of coalesces around those intersecting models, the genetic model, the environmental model, and the choice model. How those three aspects of our makeup, come together to inform our DNA or our genetics. And you can see that in the work in each phase of the piece, in each stage of the piece, whether the head, the body, or the legs, you see evidence of these ideas emerging. So where one of the papers talked about communication and how cells communicate with one another. In the art piece, you see an illustration of how this communication piece works across DNA, where certain illustrated by ears, listening to one another, but also communicating to one another. Another paper spoke about salient experiences, which directly refers to introducing certain stimuli or traumas, in lab mice as a way of triggering certain kinds of genetic responses. And then the last phase of the piece really looks at the impact of the environment on our DNA. And you can see in the drawing an actual illustration of people marching, for social justice. And all of these elements, again, coming together to form this exquisite corpse, which in many ways becomes a really great analogy just to think about our bodies in general. We are all literally exquisite corpses.
Yeah, I was thinking that when you were saying that. The other thing, that it was kind of an iterative process. So Fahama took these images and ideas from the students and then began to work on the piece, and then brought it to the class, and then got feedback, and then integrated their ideas, their feedback into the piece, which is still evolving in some ways. So not just as a analogy, but as, it's if you think about, you could also think of the body of the course evolving with the body that you were creating. So that was really cool.
So ultimately, I think this project was transformative for me in a number of ways. And Dr. Eisen and I talked about this. I realized, especially in the work around the salient experiences, how notions of trauma trigger evolutionary development, right? That you have to go through certain kinds of experiences for your body to learn to react and ultimately adapt to that kind of stimuli. And how essential, those kinds of things are in our development. I'm looking forward to continuing to explore those ideas and continuing to investigate and unpack what that actually means and how it ultimately leads to our not just physical but also our social development.
And especially in terms of how we then pass that on. We, as you hinted at earlier, we of course knew that there's folklore and all this kind of stuff that we always, and traditions and culture and social stuff that we were passing on. But I think that the kind of hyphen in the nature and nurture and the biology and the culture is epigenetics, because that gives us a way into, it just enriches our understanding of all the stuff we already knew. That's all science ever really does, right? So yeah, it's been a blast. It's been great.
So, hoping, to continue projects like this, hoping to continue to work with you, Dr. Eisen. But thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. I see we're getting some questions in the Q&A part of the Zoom. We're going to go on to the next video before we engage the panelists. We have our next cohort of artists, Olivia Dawson with Professor Allison Burdett, and the course is called Social Justice, Zoning, Contracts, and Environmental Racism.
do we bridge that gap and the deep chasms that divide us? What's missing? Common ground, connections, listening to each other. In a word, empathy. How do you explore and practice empathy? Through something that we all share. Stories.
The story starts when I was in my junior year in my AP government class. The teacher was talking about the Civil War and seemed to believe that the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. John respectfully raised his hand and asked if the teacher thought, respectfully, that the Civil War had anything to do with slavery. The teacher immediately replied and said, "Stop playing the race card. I'm sick of when people play the race card." The entire room went silent. This stung.
They explained that I talked white because I used big words, talked proper. They said this with their noses raised, and because I had a funny accent.
Then it struck.
Ew, what is that smell?
Initially, I didn't even know that they were talking to me.
Fake, but very realistic eviction notices have been left on the door of Jewish students by pro-Palestinian activists in an attempt to make a critique of Israel.
I was confused as to why my mom would rather have me learn another language such as Spanish instead of our native language, Korean. And it led to some internalized Asian shame, and you whitewash yourself just to be more accepted. You talk more white, you act more white, you dress more white.
At the time, I never really considered why this happened, and the simple interaction laid the foundation for me and dozens of other students stereotype that Hispanic people are naturally better at soccer. However, now I look back and realize how easily unfair and often untrue generalizations of race can be spread, almost like a virus.
He was coming back, I could feel it.
I'm an actor and an artist, so my life is about stories. In my world, they're called scripts. But every time I read a script, I am looking for the connections and the commonalities that I have with each character I play. I am actively searching for empathy.
I strolled through my surroundings in a blissful haze. The strong scent of roasted pork wafted through the sweeping roads. The sweet, yet savory aromas of buns and pastries and delicacies filled the open air. Pots lifted ablaze with flames, sizzling against their scents. The soft remnants of rain droplets cascaded and trickled inches from my feet as I weaved through the crowds of people that I could not help but empathize with. Their voices hovered above my mind in an understanding that was not too distinct. I could not have repeated their words, but I knew their meaning. A city born from both the history and future, the juxtaposition of the colliding two welcomed me into its arms. It was a city I desperately craved for, an unfamiliarity that became familiar by my own conviction. It was of alternate belonging, with traces of wonder and curiosity that teetered on remorse. Perhaps a nostalgia for things that never happened and for places I've never been. It was an immediate warmth that only I myself had inflicted, and perhaps that we all crave for. One day in high school, my AP psychology teacher stood in front of the room, staring back at our sleep-deprived faces, and brazenly asked if we were aware of our race right now, at that moment, sitting at our chairs. I didn't know what to respond at that time, and I thought back to my stroll across in the city of Shanghai. Yes, I thought. I was aware, but it was an awareness that I wasn't even aware of. It's as if a glass cube was placed upon my head. There's a lingering sense that tends to numb itself. It's when you wear your glasses so long, you forget they sit on your nose, or when you alarmingly explain that you lost your AirPods only to find them snuggled in your ears. It's a sense that carries with you everywhere. But it was an awareness so aware that maybe it wasn't even to the point of calling it awareness. And if anything, I was surprised that the question had to be asked, that some might even answer that they weren't aware. Everybody by now is quite aware that race is a social construct, that we had made this. But our arbitrary division does not make it any less. And in that one stroll in Shanghai, my mind settled on the wafting aromas and delicacies, and not on the glass cube we are all forced to wear.
Professor Burdett's focus on racism was systematic. As the students heard lectures or stories about other people's situation and circumstance, I asked students to examine stories from their own lives. Two different approaches, same end. Engage and discuss issues of racism in America.
As kids, I think all of our parents tried to teach us similar life lessons. Things like sharing is caring and treat others the way you want to be treated. Of course, my parents taught me those same things too. But I also had to learn lessons like, stop letting kids pet your hair, you're not a dog. You see, I had the pleasure of growing up in supposedly idyllic, primarily white neighborhoods. And that was great for some things. Golf carts and golden retrievers, well-funded schools and well-manicured lawns. And looking back, I can say that they were great places for character development too. But oftentimes, I wished I'd lived anywhere else. There were times when these so-called best cities to raise a family felt like the absolute worst. I think one of the most memorable examples of that is my experience with my hair. When I was really young, I didn't care all that much about my hair. I just wanted to spend as little time on it as possible so I could continue playing with my Barbies in my toy kitchen like any other kid. But I quickly came to find out, or rather I was told, that my hair wasn't like every other kid's. No one else's hair was described as being like a lion's mane, or sheep's wool, or poodle's fur. No one else was interrogated about how often they washed it. And no one else had their hair pulled and poked and prodded without permission. Eventually, I'd had enough. I was tired of feeling like, and being compared to, an animal in a zoo. So for years, I straightened every curl and every coil until I could hardly recognize them anymore. But in 6th grade, the natural hair movement had started to take form, and at the encouragement of my mother, I decided I would try it again. That experiment lasted all of 2 days. I didn't want to wear my natural hair anymore. But somehow, my mom convinced me, as all moms do, to try it again. Again, it felt like a scene out of a movie. The teacher was talking, and all the students were quiet, so when I opened the door, they all turned to look at me. I could see the snickers and whispers travel amongst the students. As I walked to the front of the room to give the teacher my pass for being late, I heard someone attempt to whisper,
She looks like she got
electrocuted. It was just 48 hours, but for 4 years after that, I straightened every curl and every coil until I could hardly recognize them anymore.
Through a series of theater games, writing prompts, journaling, and exercises, we built a foundation of safety and trust where the students were strong enough to be vulnerable and share a piece of themselves and listen to each other. The nature of the work was both personal and transformative.
Senior year of high school, we had a night filled with awards. And I came home with 9 accolades, as if a testament to my effort and worth. But coming home, I was coldly greeted by my father, saying, I didn't know you were smart. Followed by my mother telling him to hush, that wasn't okay. But the wound was already reopened, that sensation of imperfection and the lack of acknowledgement that I was more than any of the things that I had done. And I knew better than to take this to heart. Yet, it was already in my heart because it had been there from the very start. Because for some reason, being Asian meant that I could be smart, but never good enough unless I was perfect. And if I were perfect, then I shouldn't make a mistake. And I can make no mistake if I am a good Christian boy that acts like a man and toughens up. But I am so much more than all these things because of my vivid emotions and my sexuality. For some reason, the world looks at me and tells me that because of my race, who I like, what I feel, that I am not smart enough, not Christian enough, not man enough, not good enough. And so I rewrite my story each and every day for my God and with my faith that I make my own, to define myself with new eyes this world has never let me see before.
How do we get to redemption? We're not there yet. It will take a lot of work and time. But these students are showing us the way. They have set the tone and the example. They are telling their stories, cutting through the noise to reveal something real and impactful. It's not performative. It's a gift. Through their honesty and vulnerability, they have created a space for empathy.
As an enthusiastic young child going to school for the first time, I had a tremendous desire to belong, yet I felt isolated and alone. I vividly remember quickly sprinting home away from my school, a formidable building with cracks in its white walls and classrooms too spacious to be comfortable. The door slammed behind me as I jumped into bed and burrowed beneath the covers up to my chin, blanketed in familiarity. Nonetheless, from across the room, the boy in the mirror stared and stared, disgusted at my brown body. My eyes fell from the mirror and onto my skin. Shit surrounded me, covered my legs, drenched my face, and clogged my throat. Searching and scratching, I clawed at my dirty skin, praying chalk would replace it, and weeping when it did not.
Say so powerful, so powerful. To have the Exquisite Corpse and Epigenetics and looking at stories and empathy. Some of the questions in the chat include from Lisa Paulson, would love to hear more about the art engagement how that impacted the learning about epigenetics for students, but also how the science knowledge impacted the artist. So Fahamu and Dr. and Ari.
Well, one thing I will say, first of all, thank you again for this opportunity. It was a really great experience. I think one of the things that's been really interesting about, this course in terms of the sort of visual engagement is that even in the research that's done around epigenetics, it requires visual models to help to express and articulate the ideas that are being explored. And so it wasn't necessarily a big leap to think about visuals as it related to the research, but I think thinking about it more in terms of artistic expression as opposed to this sort of empirical knowledge gathering, I think transformed the way I know for me that this science impacted my own experience and my own connection to it.
Usually in a science class, especially in advanced science classes, it's about information, application, and critical thinking. And even though every class at Emory is very diverse, in science classes, that's rarely engaged. So like in many of these in all of our classes, we had students this semester that were tuning in from China and India and Europe and all over the United States. And great diversity, all different skin colors and sexualities. And usually those things are not explicitly engaged in a science class, but this conversation with Fahamu and the conversation we were having about epigenetics and art and the human condition allowed students to kind of bring their own identities into an upper level science class, which I think is, if not unprecedented, definitely rare.
Great. I see that Naya Bruce is in the chat and in our panel area. So Allison and Olivia, share with us how, and, and Naya, tell us how you felt about the class. If you'll all take yourselves off mute.
The class was amazing, because if you think of the word boundaries between people, I was always focused, and I focused at the beginning of the class on boundaries that are systemically imposed, redlining, mortgage discrimination, and that was always my focus. And then Olivia, working with her completely 180 degrees, changed this definition of boundaries. Yes, they're systematic boundaries, but she goes, there are boundaries between individuals that we're also going to address. And so she, through the storytelling, she said, we're gonna cross the boundaries between individuals. We're gonna increase understanding. And as you saw from and heard from the story, she was able to really reach the students, and they were able to cross those boundaries. And so, Naya, you want to talk about telling the story? And yes, somebody asked in the chat if they the students told the stories anonymously or live in class. In class, it was done in person. I mean, they bore their souls in person. We were crying. It was very impactful. But anyhow, Naya, talk about what you saw.
Yes, I think that the experience was kind of uncomfortable, but I think it was in a good way and probably for the better. When I was sharing my story, it was something that I didn't usually like to talk about or bring any more attention to than I had to. But I think that in being vulnerable, like Olivia said, I think it made the stories more impactful. And since everyone was sharing moments that were really personal, I feel like I got to connect more with the people in the class, especially since I didn't know any of them really before the class. And so I think that sharing these really personal stories really helped develop that connection and empathy between everyone in the class.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I saw in the chat that someone talked about the difference between empathy and pity. I think that empathy is about a sharing. If you're pitying somebody, it's just a one-way street. But this was shared experiences. Everybody got to share their story. And after somebody would share a story, we got to debrief and talk about it amongst ourselves. And people were able to say, hey, I can identify with your pain. I understand that, or I went through that myself. And just to see those connections that you wouldn't think were there was just transformative, because you wouldn't know that unless you shared your story. So it's not about pity, it's about empathy, and that's a sharing. But you have to feel safe to do that. My primary purpose throughout this entire semester, as I talked to Burdette, was to keep the students safe. Because you have to feel safe in order to be vulnerable and share your story. And as Naya said, it was uncomfortable, but I let them know, just because you're uncomfortable, it doesn't mean you're not safe. And sometimes when you do feel comfortable, you're not safe at all. So, it's a fine line to walk, but I think that as a community with the students, Burdette and myself, we created this space that was safe, where you could be vulnerable and we could share and experience and practice empathy.
And I know we have to move on to the next, the last two videos, but there was a question for Fahamu and Ari about where to find the images and a reading list. So how do they find out more about epigenetics? So you might want to share that while we move on to the next chat.
Yeah, I think this whole project is going to be exhibited and posted around. So as far as Fahamu's image, you should be able to have access to that.
At the end.
Yeah, publicly. And I'll make sure to include with that a reading list. I mentioned a good starting point, which is Siddhartha Mukherjee's New York article on epigenetics. That's probably a good place to start, but I'll include a reading list with Fahamu's image. Thank you.
Sounds like you're going to have a good crowd to following you all. So we'd like to go on to the last two videos and cohorts. We have artist Shaniqua Gay and Professor Alex Olson, and the course is Feminist Artists of Activism.
I want a president who looks like me, thinks of herself as much as queen, as thick as witch, ascendant of slaves, sits by graves and prays, she who levitates over the daily crimes against her. I want a president who looks like me.
Want a president who didn't grow up living the stereotypical American dream, who worked a job in high school and was on financial aid in college.
I want a president who has spent years scrubbing bleach in the houses of others and breathed chemical fumes in their dreams, who knows war, who knows the ways in which a door shut too hard becomes bombshell, becomes missed at 2:31 a.m. and cannot sleep for the next week afterwards.
In this course, Shaniqua and I encourage the students to think in and through the lens of feminist world building, an analytic that focuses our critical attention on the simultaneous work of dismantling and also making worlds from within the limits of the present. In light of our present conjuncture, we chose art activist sites that accentuate themes of trespass or transgression, bodies, ideas, even logics that are seen as intrusive, as not belonging, as somehow out of place, space, or even time. We kept coming back to the ways in which the pursuit of intersectional social justice, economic, racial, gender justice, in so many ways requires interdisciplinary social justice. Audre Lorde reminds us that there are no new ideas, only new ways of making them felt. And so Shaniqua and I tasked the students with writing a performance in conversation with their visual background that built upon and deepened these art activist conversations about new ways of belonging to one another and to the world. And we also wrote a group piece inspired by Zoe Leonard's 1991 activist intervention called I Want a President.
I want a president who has been homeless, who has lived amongst people forgotten.
I want a president who isn't straight or white or Christian or male.
Who will make a clear path to citizenship for all undocumented people.
I want a president who didn't have the luxury of not getting into politics, whose personal is political.
I want a president who knows no one is disposable, who will turn the White House into queer co-housing, who will be commander-in-chief of the feminist killjoys.
I want a president who has taken the BDSM test 15 times and has a different safe word for each partner they meet in their bedroom.
One of the quotes that I shared with them was from Alan Lopez, who says, being a Black person means that you're always having to build worlds. The world that one inhabits as a Black person, primarily in a colonized country, is a world that necessitates our elimination. And for me, I don't feel like that's just with Black people, but that can also be for LGBTQIA communities, for women, or for any persons who are not perceived to be white or male. And I wanted the students to really look at ways that they could use art to create these new worlds. I introduced them to an artist named Julie Marutu, and her work is about that, about breaking down and deconstructing what is in order to recreate her own world and what that is perceived to be. And so she uses architecture in order to do that. And she does it with color, with line, and with structure. And I felt like social abstractions would be a good way for the girls to create these new worlds, create the future that they want to see, that they want to live in, that creates safety, unity, and community for all persons.
I'm your skeleton, with black skin and black hair and black. I am the stain upon your red, white, and blue domain, and you left me to rot in that closet, my bones turned black, forgotten. You see, there's no mystery as to why the tragedy of my history was erased. I was chased into shadow, into pits, into void, devoid of power. You slipped silver into my mouth and took from me my tongue and sung, God bless America, my home, sweet home. I pray your tongue twist in your mouth turn knotted. You cannot pronounce Tchaikovsky or Karen, but Lua Toyin Salawu flows like blood past your lips, it burns. And so the reason why I have this butterfly here is kind of double-sided, because first off, in the queer community, like being called a fairy, and then in Spanish, like a butterfly, because my brother and I are half Bolivian, that is a derogatory term associated with the queer community. But I wanted to also use it as a representation of freedom. You know, monarchs travel thousands of miles and they do it like every year, and I wanted to use that. But we have these bullet holes going through the rings. And so there's blood here and there's blood on his sign in which he's saying, "Am I next?" Down here, we have this mixing of protests from the March on Washington, BLM, and a couple other ones because I wanted to show like this fight is not over. And so it's like this passage of time, but it's indistinguishable who came from what. And up in the bottom right, the reason why I'm doing that is because here we have my grandmother, and she went to the March on Washington at 8 years old. And here I am, her granddaughter, continuing to fight that same fight. I have reached into myself and found infinity lies within my kin, resurrected in the shared body, shared breath. We have decided to make a world anew. Go on, plead. Beg on your knees, for I know of all your sins. I am self-made in omnipotence. I thrive in struggle. I'm a witch and I have perfected my craft of black girl magic, black woman enchantment. For now, you may keep my tongue. I will slip into slumber, for the time is not yet ripe, but until then, I'm your skeleton in the closet, and I want a world that fits. I want a world that fits.
My collage is inspired by the idea of inadequacy, specifically in the way that we're physically perceived. I have myself in the center with words that describe me in the context of not fitting into certain norms. I am creating a world for all the fat girls. So fat girls in theater have more opportunities than Tracy from Hairspray. So fat girls in dance are respected as real dancers. So there is an entire generation of girls starving themselves to feel whole. I'm creating a world where size is only a measure of how your clothes fit, or being fat and being beautiful aren't mutually exclusive, or fat girls can feel beautiful and not finish the thought with, "for a fat girl." I do this so my future children learn that they are worthy of love no matter what they weigh. I do this so that there's a day where I will see my stretch marks not as a sign of defeat, but a symbol of victory, that my body is working the way it should. I do this so that when I tell someone I love that I am fat, they won't respond with, "No, you're beautiful." I want a world that fits.
As for my background, I chose to use images from Atlanta newspaper articles from the month of November. To me, I put these pictures together to show that there is a lot going on in the world right now, but in the background, you just have to take each problem step by step. This is represented through the puzzles, just to come to an overall solution. Happiness. How is one to obtain happiness? Post something on social media, maybe donate some money, attend a protest or two, or maybe you voted this year, singing the praises of another white man in office, but just for a moment, you're happy. How are others still fighting for the individual in a manipulative society? Rebellion after rebellion, protest after protest, movement after movement, spark after spark, but how long until the fire roars? I want a world that fits.
So to my left, the beautiful person right there is Marsha P. Johnson. She was a fundamental figure to the gay liberation movement. She was a self-identified drag queen, and she fought during the era of Stonewall, the Stonewall riots. Above me is an advertisement by ACT UP. ACT UP is also involved in gay liberation and also fighting back against AIDS. I want to abolish the savior complex that puts aside our collectivism as a society for the so-called compassion of the few, to end all philanthropy and charity in the world and replacing it with action as a global community. I want to invite a culture of mutual aid where we help each other thrive and overcome challenges. I want to abandon the capitalist notion of individualism and to dream in the collective imagination to make those dreams come to fruition. I invite all of the bodies of the people who have lived in the shadows to find their homeland once again. They say it's not possible. I say, abolish impossibility.
I want a hippy-dippy, tree-hugging president who doesn't give a damn what corporations want with the planet.
A president who's been overlooked by every president that came before.
I want a president who is aligned with the earth and her people, a planter of seeds that bloom with fiery potential in the night sky.
I want a president who takes commissions to pay rent, whose primary source of income is a GoFundMe.
I want a president who is split into so many pieces that their lifetime isn't long enough to find them all again, but they keep looking anyway.
I want a president who
will unfound the foundations and dismantle insurance companies, who has had 3 abortions and attends AA meetings.
I want a president who looks like me, whose hair is nappy and coarse. May I drop this dime? She Claire Huxtable fine. Raise hell on hot blocks. She pops and locks. Forever hustler, former dealer, and permanent healer. I want a president who looks like me.
I want a president who wants to abandon the failed American project.
A president who creates an unimaginable beginning, one that makes our differences dance to the sky.
Hands up, don't shoot. I'm tough, not bulletproof. Gonna love out loud, not afraid. Gonna march down Main in the Pride Parade.
Say, we know we want to do that. And our last art and social justice cohort is artist Okori Okecello Johnson and Professor Elizabeth Walker. The course is the prevention of mental and behavioral disorders.
Hopefully something in the last 6 to 8 months has angered you, has boiled your blood such that complacency vaporizes as steam from your mouth when you speak of the atrocities of 2020. Hopefully something in the screams of asphyxiating grown black men begging for breath and their mother pinned under official knees heavy with generations of legal slaughter and denied domestic terror has angered you. Perhaps something in the rolling admission to the long list of unconsenting martyrs from Trayvon to Floyd has dismayed you to indignation. Hopefully in the utterances of China virus and Kung flu by officials elected to keep all Americans safe from pathogens biological and sociopathological, something in those low-pitched, deceptively audible messages incensed you to censor the loud screams of silence that unsupposedly knowingly cheer on the violence done in the names of order, legality, nationalism, patriotism, and a few bad appelism. Hopefully the orphaned infants, caged children, harvested uteruses, and incarcerated refugees were enough to blind you with rage, rendering you forever unwilling to turn a blind eye again toward the suffering of those who have suffered so much that they might walk hundreds of miles in the hopes of suffering less. And even if this was not your fight, the fallen not your fallen, hopefully in watching how first they came for this one and next for that one, you sensed that if one day they came for you, there may be no one left to speak on your behalf, as Niemoller says, and how that angers you as it should. So hopefully something in the last 6 to 8 months has angered you, made you feel as though your own mental health was at stake, for how much more could we honestly be expected to take? And ironically, isn't that exactly what is at the center of all of this? Our individual, our communal, our regional, our national mental health. And even still, there are so many voices. There's so many voices amongst us. So many pieces of us necessary to make this whole, this thing, this community. So many sharp edges, so many fragile bits, but every piece matters. Every voice sings. But how do we sing together? How do we piece together?
Whether I will be harassed or attacked by someone because
systematic barriers in place with the COVID-19 pandemic continue to exacerbate.
Reading a blog that you kind of think or just like, oh, it's just this, oh, it's just that. And it really showed me that, like, no, like, those things were really damaging.
Some say, for some reason, no one wanted to give me a chance to shine. And they shot at Arnaldo Rios Soto simply because he couldn't read the signs that he was in danger much more than he was one. Some say social justice is a step up from social equity. But when you see us, what do you see? Are you able to see that human beings are ever moving towards being free, being healthy? Some say mental health should be a bigger part of social justice, and that social justice is a state of being civilized. But whose health? My health? Your health? How? When history and wealth keep the center of healthcare white, suburban, and nowhere near those who need it most? Some feel blatantly pinpointed when the images of violence and hate spill over and off onto our screens,
and others worry so that their parents will be targets of racial violence because, again, it seems that no matter what science says, a race of people can be blamed for a deadly virus. And while this is the land of opportunity, do I really want to come to a place that will blame me for a pandemic and discriminate against my Asian face? Nothing can be done to make sense of any of it. This country is not fair or equitable, never has been. That's all there is to it.
And it's so interesting that mental health is as invisible as social justice. And right now, both are just interesting ideal frameworks constantly eluding us. But yet we look to this broken hole to tell us who we are, often leaving us with cognitive dissonance and dysphoria. But at least we are speaking up, giving voice to our pain. And if there is optimism, it is in the refrain, we will no longer not have the conversation. We will no longer not have the conversation. And as a result, there is so much more hope for our younger generation as they are able to make themselves seen, making sure that they are being more considerate to immigrants, refugees, native populations, and all. Making sure that we are invested in the mental health that we need, and that we are making and answering the call to enshrine the right we have to participate in every fucking bit of it. Some say perhaps this time has been a blessing in disguise, an imperative to uplift each other and listen, a new and better attempt at being civilized.
I don't seem so optimistic about the young.
I do, and I ask, what do you and yours believe about mental health, about our laws, about social justice, and about the plausibility of peace for all?
We want that. And what does a human do with his freedom? He wants to be better. He wants to be healthier. He wants to self-actualize. And when she gets her freedom, when she is healthy, when she reaches her potential, so does the community. And that is our higher aim.
And then there is Elijah McLean, ancestored because of more of the same. He may have been swinging his arms, chatting pleasantly with himself, wearing a ski mask, attending peacefully to his own mental health. But all we could see was a threat. All we could see was a threat. So we pumped him full of ketamine and sent him to his death. But he told us he was just going home. Just going home. We couldn't leave him be when he was just going home. And in his unknowing prophecy, he sent us a focus. Home as a locus for all that we are becoming, for all that we are leaving behind, for all that we are no longer denying, for all the ways in which we are stopping our lying about how we benefit from the way things are. But we can't lie anymore because he was just going home. Just going home. And so must we, with imagination and light and dedication to rightness over order, and an internal peace that we bring into fruition, let us focus on the vision of home. A home where Elijah plays to us on strings that let his violin sing, of a world where he can be himself and we can be better, where poverty is not a sentence, where race is not a caste, where oppression is not tradition, and healing is the thing, and where we can be, and where Elijah can be peacefully just going home. 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 He's home.
Fabulous, fabulous. If our last group will take themselves off mute, so Corey, Elizabeth, Liz, Alex, Shaniqua. We do have, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We just have 5-6 more minutes. And the first one that I see is around the playing of the music, and is there extended plans for this project on outside of this venue?
I don't know. In all honesty, this has been such a powerful experience. What you watched is really a culmination not only of the conversations that we had in class, but also the committee work of the students, where we had one group of students that was focused on kind of creating prompts to harvest responses from students. We had another committee of students that was responsible for helping to kind of craft that language into poetry. They kind of gave me a lot of feedback, and then we worked together. And then we had a final group of students that gave feedback on the music composition. And it's such a cathartic moment to kind of see it presented, just because, you know, there's really so much that's kind of gone into it. To be honest with you, my primary and immediate vision was now. I don't know that I've had all that much time to think all that much about what's going forward. Honestly, I would love for there to be a round two. There's just some things that, you know, I think both, and then I want to give a big round of applause and thanks both to um, Miriam, who was a student that performed with me. She did such an amazing job. Miriam Pearsall. She did such an amazing job reading the poetry that there's that third section of Just Going Home. We didn't include her voice, but we are creating a separate product of the music and her voice just for engagement, for like meditation and thought that you can kind of download and have access to. So that was really amazing getting to work with her in that capacity. And then Gabriella Arp has been our video producer, editor, kind of co-collaborator with that. And it was great working with her. We really pulled the imagery together in like the last 2 weeks. So it's been a bit of a sprint. And I know that, you know, both of us are like, oh, we like what we did, but there's even more that we'd like to do with this project. So maybe there will be a round two. I don't know, Carlton, Arts and Social Justice folks, which I got, you know. Yeah, how we'll figure it out.
We'll have an answer to that soon to come. Liz, tell us about the mental health.
Yeah, so this course, we talk about a lot of these topics that are so salient to everything that's going on right now. And so the fellowship was just a really wonderful way to weave in art and talk about this in a different way, both in how race and the pandemic and trauma impact people's mental health and can contribute to mental health issues. Also thinking about it within the course, speaking about how we can protect our own mental health and promote our own mental health. And so we had a lot of conversations about story and about mental health and mental illness throughout the class. That was really, the music and the art really took it to a whole other level that I had never experienced before, which is really wonderful. Miriam, do you want to chime in on your thoughts?
Sure. I definitely want to start by saying Okori was just fabulous during our class and really kind of guiding us through this artistic process. I think most of the students in the class were a little unsure about how the project would go, but we're so, I know I speak for all of us, that we're so proud of how it turned out, and just really grateful that all of our voices could be a part of that final product. I think definitely having the lens of social justice along with mental health was really impactful for me this semester. And also obviously adding in the art piece as well, because I've spoken before to others just about how I had to process a lot about kind of what happened this past summer. And I don't feel like in any of my other classes, I really got an opportunity to kind of process what was going on in the world. And obviously for me as a Black woman, kind of experiencing different things vicariously. So I was just really, really grateful for this opportunity, and really glad to be a part of this project.
Thank you all. I'd like to bring in Shaniqua and Alex. I want a president that looks like me. How did you all come to the backgrounds for the art, for the students and get them engaged in the spoken word? Shaniqua?
We wanted them to be engaged in the world that they've been in probably for the past 9 months. And so we wanted to use that as a space of creativity and information about all the fodder that they had gleaned during the course. Alex and I were already dealing with very rich soil. The students are brilliant in and of itself, which I'm sure you heard through the videos. Alex, if you want to give feedback as well. I keep talking.
Yeah, so I mean, we had 10 fantastic students, and we were only able, because of the duration of the video, we were only able to really showcase 4 of them, but we will be posting all of them. They're fantastic. And they were asked to think with one of the activist artists that we had presented and researched and focused on throughout the semester. And Micaiah is actually one of our students who's here. Micaiah, do you wanna add anything about the process of writing work from scratch? And how you wrestled with pairing that with your visual background?
Yeah, I think we started with the visual component under Shaniqua's her guiding, her mentorship. She was really open with helping us. She gave us about 4 or 5 artists to look to for inspiration about how to build our collage work. And we got feedback from everybody. We got feedback from her, and from there we went to the writing process. And I mean, it was just super fluid, super raw, and super flexible for whatever we wanted to bring to the table. And like Dr. Olson said, we were thinking with a lot of like art activists or queer feminist scholars, anything that really struck us personally in an emotional way, and we were able to incorporate our personal experiences with what we had learned in the course. And it was super empowering, super liberating to hold space for each other's experiences and to hold space for art that was for us, by us, and engaging in a form of world building.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what we were thinking was rather than trying to pretend that we're not in this particular political moment, to use the limits to expose the limits for what they are. We spent a lot of time throughout the semester thinking about what this moment has taught us about race, about capitalism, about the limits of these various systems that we are all kind of entrapped and snared within, and how we work from the inside out to do something drastically different rather than this kind of return to normal that we're all kind of being coaxed toward. How do we work against that old normal that brought us to this very place where so many people are suffering? And how do we build worlds in this kind of two-dimensional space where intimacy is both like at its peak in some ways, like this feels very intimate, and also so delimited by this kind of screen world that we find ourselves kind of trapped by.
We're coming to the end of our time, and I'd like to invite everyone on the panel to come forward.
I just wanted to jump in and say how impactful this partnership and experience has been for me as an artist. One, I'm also a teacher, a former teacher, so it was really wonderful working with the teacher again and kind of planning classes. But I think just because you're a creative person doesn't mean that you kind of understand everything there is about what it is you want to say or how you can say things. And this project really helped me to kind of grow and to explore even some of the things that I was thinking and feeling, and some of the conversations that I was having with Dr. Walker about mental health, and even just the construction of health and mental health, and the way that it plays such a part in social justice and really in oppression, and like who's visible and who's not. I don't know, it was an opportunity, an invitation really, to consider things in a very powerful and different way that I think will stay with my art going forward. So thanks. Really enjoyed working with you, Dr. Walker, and loved working with the students. And so.
And we also appreciated each of the artists. I'm going to turn it over to Carlton.
I'd like to, before I give my piece, I'd like to maybe open it up to hear more panelist voices. We have 7 minutes on the clock. I definitely don't want to take all that time. And if not more panelists, to engage more of the community, the students that are there, the family members, the friends, and maybe at the 4 minute mark, 2 minute mark, Kevin and I will come back and say some closing words.
Okay. More comments, questions?
And I think that there's maybe some active questions in the that maybe we can field.
They were asking about when the recording would be available, and I've been told you can follow us at Emory Arts, and the website will be up at the first of the year. But just follow us at Emory Arts, and the full products will be posted there.
I wanted to follow up on Okori's comment. I've just been so grateful to work with Okori and be part of this fellowship. It's been an incredible experience. And one thing that stood out to me that as I've been looking at my students' reflections is how art can really make public health and mental health more relatable just to the general population. And I think this is just all of these presentations today are a way of showing ways of reaching different audiences in really emotional ways that are really beyond sometimes what we talk about in public health classrooms. And so it's just been a wonderful experience to stretch how I think about what our students can and should be doing, both in the classroom and then once they leave and graduate and go out to do public health work.
I just want to piggyback on that as well. There's a popular saying, don't talk about it, be about it. And this program is really a great example of that being about it, right? Whereas it's not just discussing social justice as a theory or a concept, but actually activating it in a way that allows for the students to understand the connection between the things that they're learning and the things that they are experiencing, and being able to see real world in real time how their efforts, how their education, how their work can transform society.
Great. Savannah Miller did ask a question to any of the panelists. Do you have suggestions or advice on how a student could take the initiative or engage in social justice and arts within their current class?
I think, when I was in the classroom, we were always talking about, and maybe this isn't the best word, alternative evaluations. But there are, the work of college and really grad school, most of it is expression, right? It's expression in a particular kind of way, but there's so many ways of expressing certain truths or experiences or ideas. And I really think in some ways you can encourage teachers to evaluate a broader spectrum of expression, because art can be just as analytical or argumentative or demonstrate command of a knowledge base as anything else. We need to have the environment and the willingness to kind of be able to engage it and analyze it. So I felt like, I was talking with the grad students towards the end of this program, and they were all preparing papers, and I was preparing my own paper, right? This is literally, an expression of my relationship with the course. So I think we can do our own work in some ways with that.
Anyone else have a feeling on how your art is in the laboratory?
In the time we have remaining, thank you so much, Candy, for Dr. Tate for being our MC and gathering us together. I'd love to invite Kevin to offer some words, maybe even to answer some questions about next steps, and then I'll close with my best shot at bringing this all together. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you, Carlton. Thank you, Candy. And thank you everyone for joining us for what's been such an incredibly powerful program of presentations and conversation. of inspiring work by Emory students, faculty, and artist fellows, and of urgent calls for continued action. As we get ready to say goodbye for now, I wanted to invite everyone to connect with our program early next year on our new project website, emoryasj.org, which is scheduled to go live in January. On our site, you can learn more about the Emory Arts and Social Justice Program and about our first cohort of ASJ Fellows. And you can learn about ways in which you can become involved, either by helping to support the program directly or by applying to become part of the second annual cohort of Arts and Social Justice Fellows in the summer of 2021. In the meantime, please consider supporting our work by giving to the Emory College Center for Creativity and Arts or to the Emory University Center for Ethics, and designating your gift to the Emory Arts and Social Justice Fellows Program with links in the chat. For our closing remarks this afternoon, I'll turn to my co-director, Professor Carlton Mackey.
With less than a minute left, there's no way I could say thank you enough. There's no way I could describe and express the gratitude and how full I am with being a part of this, with seeing all of your faces and knowing that together we took what could have been a setback and made it a step forward. So let that be the parting word. And in the words of Fahamu Peku, don't talk about it, be about it. Let this moment be an opportunity for us to move out of this space and to not just let this be a vehicle for entertainment, but for us to have the difficult conversations in the spaces that you find yourself, for us to be open to and be transformed by empathy and to be the change that we want to see. Thank you all so much for your support, for your effort, for everything that it took to make this possible in the face of so many challenges. I can't thank you enough, and inspired by what will come as a result.